Alright, let's say hello. Hello. Here's a quick tutorial, first one probably on a series. I'm starting to get involved with a game development project, and it's been long overdue to create sort of assets. Let's see what we have here. We have a game, Island Troll Tribes. Let me go to Dog Waffle and show you one of the Dog Wafflers of the moment. There are a few here that are game developers, and if I can find it, if only I could find it there, Gamer Print Shop. Now this is not related to my project, but it does relate to, well, I guess to my project to some extent, in that in many games, especially the ones that are the bird's eye view, top down on a map, you will have the need for assets like this. You'll need something like I don't know, bushes and trees and shrubbery and a variety of different plants as seen from above. And so what this tutorial is about is to show you some variants you can create, very gnarly ones, some trees and bushes that look a bit different. And this one in particular is using the force field to deform the tree. And so if I let it go very quickly, you can tell it's kind of going in a very gnarly way, very I don't know how to describe it, noisy way maybe, or something different from the way it normally does. And the way it normally goes is something like this. It goes up, right? So you draw a tree with the plant settings or the foliage brushes. Normally that's what it does. It depends a bit on what preset you choose and what parameters you modify, but pretty much most of these classic trees anyway will have some branches go up and then some leaves and twigs and other things go out to the side. Let's do one more that has perhaps a little bit of I don't know, some flowers on top. I think there's one with snow or winter or something. Yeah, I can never see it, never find it. We need a graphical way to identify these. That's definitely not it. Alright, let's see at the top here, maybe branch. Well, that's interesting too, but again, that's not the one I was thinking of. And let's see, some classic trees. Okay, so we have some trees, and if we enable the force field, we can get two very different looking trees. And you can see here, very different. Okay, so what is that force field thing, right? What is that? It's actually, let me free it. Let's get rid of it. It's something you may have seen in a prior tutorial I did just recently, a couple of weeks ago. It's on the particle side, not the foliage. So these are two different types of particle brushes. In fact, all of these are a certain category of particle brushes. And you start with this panel simply by choosing the brush and going to particles. You probably can find it in other places. Let's see here. Yep, particles. Shortcut I don't know if that stands for incredibly addictive. But what you see is that you have different types of brushes. You have bristle brushes that paint stuff over. These are pretty old. We've had these for a good 5 or 6 years. There's orbicals, which are different, and I'm not going to even describe too much in detail how they are different. But the ones that we want to focus on are the particle brushes. Enable those. And set some preset such as Batty Grass. And you can see that it's doing some nice job at creating some foliage and grass, but without much extras. No foliage, no splitting into additional branches. I mean, you could actually, excuse me, let me fix that, correct that. Winter branches, for instance, you can do stuff like that, and you can have the number of splits here. If you give it just 2, it's far less, far shorter. If you give it 20 or 22 for that matter, it's much bigger, and it kind of starts curling around. So there are a lot of different styles of twigs and branches you can create with that. Just look at that. In just a few seconds, creating sort of a hillside backdrop of shrubbery, and then something in the foreground with grass and tufts of that. But nonetheless, it's one kind every time. Right? So you choose one, like the brushes, the grass, or you choose these twigs, and they can split. But try adding some flowers or leaves or something else to that. You need a particle system that's rules based, where there are multiple rules. This is one set of rules for the entire particle set for the lifetime of it. And what you really need is a new set of rules as it branches to, for instance, give it leaves or flowers or other appearance, not always just another branch. And that's what the foliage brushes do. When you enable those, you're essentially giving it much more than a single rule. It's as if you have a combination of a bunch of these. And we can, for instance, go and draw something like this. So there's some big fat branches and some slightly thinner flowers, or there may be some branches like these. And you can see how it's different, because you have some branch material, and then you have something that looks a bit like leaves or flowers, or a combination of all of the above. And there's some evergreens. Those are fascinating too, and they may change directions by which way the mouse is moving, so they may use the mouse speed, and tons of other little details. You could set the gain, the brightness, pen size. What's that? The 4.5. If I make it 2, it's a much thinner. Let's make it 1. That's really small or thin, so you can barely see it there. Right after, especially after the anti-aliasing. So where am I heading with that? Right. Basically, we have plenty of grass and trees that we can generate with this, but it's never quite enough. So we need something to create something additional, and that something additional is the force field in this case. So we'll go to the particle brushes, enable those, and or even without enabling it, hit the force field. Now, before we do that, we need some image that's the displacement map that will act as the force field. And one I would recommend to play with, that's a pretty good one to use, that I was using a little bit earlier, is if you go to the render menu and look for cold lava, there it is. Use that one, right, and change the size. Defaults are usually just fine. Click that, and then simply make that the force field. So click on force field, and a few seconds later of scratching its head, oh no, look at that, it actually wants you. Oh no, there it is. I must have clicked on the side. So what you have now is a force field. So when you paint with these particles, they are now subject to the calamities of the force field. Without the force field, or if you reduce the force of it, the intensity, the particles will do what they usually do. And if you increase the longevity or the lifespan right here, they'll come down for much longer. If you reduce the gain or increase the gain, reduce the shadow, change the lines to shrinking lines, all sorts of effects you can have with that alone. Without the force field, it looks like this. And with the force field in effect, let's say about 50% of that force, it starts growing in other directions. Right, so it looks very different. And then of course you can get it even more contained. You can change the particles gradient, the colors of the particles, the hue. You can give it tinted, bluish tint, bingo, reddish or purple, and so on. So this force field though is what we want to focus on, and that's what is particularly useful to create new forms of shrubbery, because you can give it a greenish or some sort of a tint like that, and it's starting to look just very different. Now the other thing also is, you notice that when I let go, it might put an additional dab of particles at the top, and if I stop it, you'll see it dark, like a little dark blotch, like this one here, right? And that's not nice. I'd like to avoid that, and the way to avoid it is to tell it not to keep generating new particles, because basically once the particles are dead, a new generation of particles are shooting out, and they may go on the darker they may start with the darker settings on the gradient, or in this case here it starts with the bright and then gets darker and darker. Right, so depending on where you hit it, when you stop, it might have just started a new series of particles, and it would be nice to kind of stop it. All you got to do to make that happen is press and hold the shift key. As long as the shift key is down, no additional particles are being generated. Now the ones that are already there, they keep going, but once they're dead, that's it. Buried alive, don't bury it dead, and and they're gone, and there's no new generation of them. So check this out. I'm going to just keep going here, and you see how it's kind of doing one at a time, and keep going, and then I'm holding the shift key down, and that's it. No more. I keep moving, nothing. If I let go of the shift key, it keeps going again. So with that, what you can do is simply paint, and when you say it's time to stop, press and hold the shift key, and before you let go of the shift key, let go of the mouse, and then that way it doesn't add any more blotchy there. Let's see, for instance, one of those. This one here, press and hold the shift key, it will finish it up, and that's it. Alright, so that's an interesting one to remember, but most importantly, the force field. And so I wanted to go into using the force field to create some of these assets that we have, that we need for some of the games. We go to the foliage brushes and simply enable that, and now the foliage brushes that we have show very different. Right, check this out. Again, without the foliage brushes, it looks like this. This is one of those, let me make it full size so it doesn't have to waste any time on additional scaling. So you see the grass like this, right? And if you want to actually create an asset with a transparent background, you want to enable the alpha, create alpha over here, and then generate this thing. Let go, wait a second, and now you have a selection mask. It's a very detailed selection mask. It might be easier to see it perhaps by using the overlay alpha. There you go, and even disabling the marching ants. We don't really need those. All we have to see is where did we actually get to select the twigs versus the leaving the background transparent. Alright, so that's what this looks like without the force field. And now I'm going to gradually increase the power or the force drag, and there are a couple of different choices that what is the force field based on? Is it the contours? Is it the slope? Is it the hue, color changes, or the brightness, the value? So the default one I think is the contour, and right now it's doing this. And I should probably get rid of the alpha and make sure the alpha is clear. There you go. Alright, so we have this by default. Now I'm increasing the power a little bit, and it's already starting to look very different. It's shooting out faster, and now it's getting more erratic. I'm not doing much different. I can actually move very slowly, and it still takes it far away. And that's because the force field is just like acting like a magnet. And so this is a really fascinating place to start experimenting, because check this out. If I go like this, right, and say, wait, this could be a really interesting elevation map. Can you imagine what that looks like as an elevation map? Well, let's go do that. Let's go figure it out. Transform Puppy Ray, and you now have some very old looking skin here. And let's say we want to make this look a bit better quality, do a final render. There you go. Now, okay, so maybe we need to smooth it a little bit. Let's go increase the pre-filter. Let's add some reddish global illumination. And let's move back a little bit higher, or turn over, looking over to this direction here. Where's the sun? There's the sun. Oh, there it is. And that's the sun here. The shadow, the shade looks like it's going in the other direction, so obviously that's an image in the back that's not actually acting as the sun. We can change the light source position to be somewhere else, and there you go. So it gives you an idea of some of the fun stuff you can explore simply by creating some of these very unique elevation maps. And perhaps we can even make it more elevated. That's increasing the scale, or reduce it to almost no displacement, and then maybe have the displacement much more refined, like this. And what else? Well, let's go do our final render, and there we go. Okay, so that gives us an idea of what that might look like if we do use it as an elevation map. Right, there we go. Now, let's go back to the prior and paint some more of these, with continuing to increase the force field. So we have this force field now really taking it apart. At the moment the particles are let loose, they are being channeled by that elevation, by that force field that we used, the cold lava. Now you can also do another thing here, which is the force drag. So here again, without any force field, it looks like this, and then you can go with the force drag and start to contain it. And look at that, so many new styles of foliage and flower. Now combine that with a little bit of power. It looks yet another category of tree. Very dried up bushes there. So this is one place where you just want to explore and try things. And so now let's use a different tree. Let's load a preset for some of these classic trees. Check this out. So without the force, it looks like this. Right? And as you increase the power, it's starting to add some very unique disruption to that. Look at that, going all over the place. But you can also now increase the force drag, so it kind of contains it a little bit. It still looks wacky, it still looks kind of noisy and disrupted, but it's not going that far away. So check this out, like this. Now let's say you want to give it a little bit of depth, some sort of a darker appearance at the base there. You can probably do some color cueing, give it kind of a greenish tint. There you go. That's a post-process that it's applying afterwards. Maybe a reddish tint. You don't see it initially, but you see that it's doing it afterwards. And all of that you can also do with the alpha channel, so create alpha along the way. And so this would be a very good set of resources that you can create with the alpha channel, to then turn it into a let's see, where is it? Something like this here. Let's go and create that with the alpha, and something like this. And now you can go and you see the marching ants. You can pick this up as a custom brush right here from the brush menu. Use the selected as brush, and you can preview it to see it. Where is it? Right there. Oh, you need to disable the particles to actually now see it in the regular brush mode. There you go. And you can start painting that. And so now you essentially have this asset of a static brush image that you can paint in a variety of ways with full opacity, and take that into your game developer system. Let's play with a few more. Let's enable that again and try a few more, perhaps with dark blue tinting, or actually without the alpha. Let's do that without the alpha. There you go, clear. There you go. Alright, so maybe a really dark tinting on the primary color. Yep, that makes it a dark blue. And even all the way to black. I'm not sure if that's going to turn it totally black. No, it's basically I don't know if it's really a plain multiply. It's a bit of a combination of additive and multiply. But there are some other parameters than the color Q. We can say we don't need the shading if we don't want that 3D look. So there's another set of interesting illustrative pieces. Timescale also. What the timescale will do is it will it's kind of the equivalent to the particles parameter here on the more. It's kind of the equivalent to the age decrement, right? When you do age decrement, you essentially have told it that every time a particle dies and a new one branches off, it's okay to do so, but to keep it smaller and smaller. So the longer, the older it gets, the shorter it lives for the next round, and also the less size it will reach. So, for instance, you see here, every time I keep going, you see how that really turned out only a very short lifespan here, and it gets smaller and smaller for each of those. Right. So, for instance, if I go from left to right, like this here, yeah, I need to go faster. Maybe not that fast. There you go. So you can see the first one reached a fairly decent size around here. Let me highlight that with a simple brush. There you go, using the orange color, something like that. So the first one reached a fairly decent size like this. The second one, second generation, got to this size. The next one got about this much, and then gradually it just gets smaller and smaller. So that's the age decrement, meaning that every time that the particle is split because it has reached the its lifespan, there's a lifespan to each particle as it shoots out, and once it has reached the end, what happens to it is that it splits up to 3 times, and that split is going to be subject to a smaller dimension, smaller size for the next lifespan. Everything gets to live shorter and be smaller based on this age decrement. Right. So if you give it only a little bit of age decrement, that transition or that change is not so easily seen. It's not so visible. Right. So for instance, you might go like this, and it keeps going, and it looks like it's still the same size. And only after a long while you see and you notice, oh yeah, it did actually gradually get smaller. Right, so the age decrement here has a big impact on what the roots look like when, for instance, you do those roots right there. Those will look like they're getting smaller and smaller towards the end of it. Right, that's exactly what we're talking about here. See? So we have the age decrement parameter for that, and that sort of parameter is the same thing under the foliage for the time scale. So the time scale is something similar to that. Scale the particles based on their time within the maximum lifespan. Right. So you can see that if you have that, if you enable the time scale on those trees, the appearance of the branches as they split is going to be affected in the way that makes them appear to get smaller and smaller. Whereas here, well, it still does that too, but to a lesser degree. And let's see what else we have. The pen size, we could start with a much fatter trunk or tree. And then we also have the tint color, which you can set independently of a fog color, which the fog color is sort of distance, depending on the distance, based on the distance. So if you do something like this here and you say you want to add some fog, give it something like a dark blue fog effect, what's going to happen is that that fog effect is going to modify the coloring of the branches, but more so if they're farther away. If they're close, you won't see much of that effect. And really, for it to really look like fog, usually what you do is you make the fog color the same as you have in the background. So you're going to need to pick a color that is indeed the same. Ideally, what you do is you actually pick an RGB value, and then you probably have some options here to set that. So you can choose some of those predefined gradients there of the color palette. And so with that, it's a little bit easier to find a particular preset color. But you also want that to be the color that you erase to, perhaps. And then when you draw your trees, the fog will kind of make it blend to that background a little bit better than if it were a different color. Now, other than the fog color, there's also a tint color here. And so that one's kind of a multiply to start modifying the color of the tree somewhat more. And sometimes really combining both of these, the tint color and the fog color, is what gets you the very best results. Okay, so let's see what else we have here while we're looking at that. The maximum lifespan, that certainly also will affect the appearance of the tree. You see here it's a much smaller bush or shrubbery. And then the maximum number of particles too, that can make it look very sparse. And sometimes you need that because, you know, not all trees are really well built and rich with tons of branches. Some of them are very very bare, like this one here. It doesn't have a whole lot to show for in terms of additional shrubbery or leaves or fine twigs and so on. So play with those parameters to create some of your best trees. And so let's say we have a couple more that we have created, and you want to turn that into, oh, that's an interesting one. I think that's one of those that I wanted to look for. Look at that. If I turn the power off, yeah, that one looks like this. Okay, so it's kind of a complete tree directly in with a single brush stroke, generating the entire tree. And it actually has depth information too, and you know, that's going to be used for the fog with the depth cueing. But now let's look at what happens if I increase that force field we had created very early on. Let's go about this much, 30%. So already the branches look like a little bit more lively. And let's go even stronger, and now it's just totally chaotic and out of control. So now is where we go, perhaps instead of that, use the force drag. Now it's much more contained. And this is actually great if you want to do something like rendering it from the top. Right, this is going to be more of a top-down appearance. This is going to be much more what you might use in a game as a piece of asset for a bird's eye look, a bird's eye view. Now let's change the color here back to white, and do a few more. There's the slope also, that's another mode. Perhaps a little bit more on the power, less on the force drag. You just have to try those, right? I mean, it's a bit unpredictable unless you really play with this for a while and you say, oh, I know what's going to happen if I change this or if I touch that parameter. But without doing that, it's going to be a big surprise every time, and a fun experience either way. You'll see the slope now. Well, let's try the hue. Let's change the hue. I mean, let's use the hue for the calculation of the force field. Well, no surprise here, this is not containing any difference in the hue. When you look at the swap image, I have a copy of that force field, the cold lava, and it really didn't have any hue changes. So this is not responding in any intelligent way. What we can do though is perhaps look at the value. That one should give us something. Yep, the value is indeed acting like it has a little bit of a force field. It can build a force field on that. So let's see what that looks like. just fascinating, just really interesting. Let's see if we have shading we can disable here. Yep, sure do. So I encourage you to play with this if you are a game developer and you're creating assets for game. A lot of different types of trees are waiting to be planted here. What can I say? It's a different one every time. Without the force field, like this, tiny little thing. Look at that. And then the moment you add some power to that with the force field, it's just a very different experience. And each of those, you know, put those into with the alpha channel there. Let's create alpha. Let's do that. So the workflow would be something like this here, right? If you want to create a bunch of them, create one here. That one is too close to the edge. Let's undo that. Still too close. There you go. And another. And another. Actually, these become transparent because we already have an alpha channel here. So we would probably need to pick them up one by one as we create them. So let's go and Shift K to clear this. Let's do one. Or maybe right in the middle, why not? There you go. Pick that up as a custom brush. Right, store it. Boom, that's your first asset. Now let's go clear this and create another one. Okay, pick that up as a custom brush. Store that. Now you have a second one. Right, and maybe a third one. And in fact, why not do a combination of 3 or 4 of them? So what you can do is you can store this brush. Let's go selection, store alpha, store the alpha channel, and then clear it, and then add something more to it, and add the original selection to this, and get the alpha. Now you have the combination of those. Clear that, and add something else. It has its own selection mask. Add this current cumulative thing here. So we have a nice combination of the alpha from the prior two with the new one, and you can visualize it again by doing a get alpha. And so you can keep going like that and add more and more pieces to the puzzle. Clear the selection, do something like this here, or if you don't like it, maybe this way, or maybe change the parameters here a bit more on the force. And let's say you want to again add this and get the alpha. So the combination is perfect here now. Now let's again get the brush together, use the selected as the brush, and store that, and you have one more brush. That's no longer a particle brush, that's now just a static image. Let's turn the particles off, and you see a brush that is based on that combination of multiple particles that we had created. So this brush image has transparency to it. We can see, for instance, if we render I don't know, something like the Starry Night, and add the atmosphere to that. There you go. Now we can pick any of these brushes and paint those in front. Now here's of course one thing that we also notice is that there's a little bit of a white glow around it. If you zoom in, you can see that kind of anti-aliased white glow, and that's something we can easily fix. Simply taking the brush, let's say this one here for instance, and then after selecting that brush, you can go to the brush pre-multiply correction there, and you say what color the background used to be. It used to be white, that's why we get this little whitish edge, and you say white and fix that, and now it's gone. Alright, so that's really the brush you're interested in keeping. In fact, that's the one that you not only keep here, the old one you can toss. This is the one you want to work with, but more importantly, you want to also store that. So keep that in your browse media here somewhere under my brushes. Right, and give it a name. Save your current brush with all its settings, and this is a Gamer's Asset number 1. There. and so you can always pick that and go back to it. So same thing with these. You would want to clear, select the brush, go to pre-multiply correction, make it white. It remembers that, so you don't have to keep redoing that. Check it. Yep, no longer does it show the white edge. It's a perfect match. And store that one. And now another thing you can also do is, if you want that the image, just the image, forget the size and other parameters of the brush, the mode. If you want just the image, save that as a PNG file. So you have it with the alpha channel, keeping that transparency. It'll be perfect. Now that said, sometimes you want this thing, but you want to add a little bit of a glow, make the glow even bigger, kind of really give it a full, what do we call it? A full edge outline around it. Right? Because when you look at this, you say, oh, I can see it, but it's a little bit skimpy. Maybe I want to really add a little bit to that. So one thing you can do is actually increase the size of the transparency that's under the brush here, transparency, and grow the keying. And that immediately adds up to that. You can do the shift curly brace to keep adding to that. That just adds a really funky looking effect to that. But hey, sometimes that's what you want, especially when you work with text. That's of course a tool that we use particularly for text. So anyway, so that's a quick look at how to create some really funky assets that you might use in game. And in fact, I'll finish here simply by grabbing this one again. Let's make sure we give it get rid of the transparency here on there it is, pre-multiply correction. And so now we have the way we want it. And now what I'll do is I'll paint it kind of in the same place, but I'll have it rotate a little bit. So what I need is to allow it to rotate. That's the transform. Use the direction, right, of the mouse. Use the direction of the pointer's motion to determine the angle of the brush. You can actually see that over here in the particle, where is it? Down here in the brush settings, which you get right there too, the settings. The brush settings will allow you to see this option here. There's the size change and the angle, but both of these really depend on you okaying transformation in general for custom brushes. So make sure on the custom brush you do allow the transforms, or you can simply do that right here, TR, bingo. See that checkbox now? That's what that TR for transform does. It allows the transformation of the custom brush. And this is something we want to keep optional, because sometimes on the slow machine it would just take too long to do so. So we have that as an option, and when you do so, it can rotate, it can keep the path based on which way you turn with the mouse. And you also have the size change. And maybe you don't want the size to change so much, so you can have the size at the original value, but you see how the rotation is changing. Now you want that perhaps a little bit faster, so reduce the step to make this almost immediate there, maybe 1 or 2, and so it's going to have many more of those immediately painting right there. You don't even have to move much, and it's right there. Let's finish with some fun here. Let's go and enable the symmetry, or even the kaleidoscope mode. Let's go 8, and you see it's doing 8 of those all at the same time. Let's try the symmetry. That one probably will be a little bit more impressive. Let's do horizontal mirror and vertical mirror at the same time. And so as we're painting, you can see what it's doing here. A rather fascinating display of colors.